Good afternoon. We are Inside China Business. Previously, we published videos that explained how U.S. universities are facing severe financial challenges. They're really struggling because the Chinese students are not going over anymore. More and more students from China are either staying home or staying away. And there is a strategy for U.S. universities to be replacing these missing Chinese students with students from India or from other countries instead. This isn't working out very well so far, but that is their hope. The damage is really piling up now, and it's almost everywhere you look. So, University of New Hampshire, Penn State University, University of Arizona, the Big Ten, Drake University, the Wisconsin state system, Connecticut, New York. For the sake of time, we'll move on, but it's everywhere. Public schools, private schools, and enrollment is falling not only among Chinese students, but now among US students as well. And this is causing administrators to make some tough decisions. They're slashing budgets, laying off professors, closing departments, and even closing entire campuses. But when we look at the problem even more closely, we see something else, that even at the schools that are not seeing big declines in enrollment, they are facing financial crises too. The University of Chicago is one of the best universities in the world, and they have a top business school. U.S. News and World Report put Chicago as the best business school in the U.S. Bloomberg has got them at number 2. But Chicago is also running huge deficits. Besides the fact that they're meeting all their enrollment targets, despite the fact they're able to charge very high tuitions, they're even raising tuitions. For a long time, US universities have had a very serious structural problem, and it's a pricing problem. For decades, they have increased tuition at 3 times the rate of inflation, and they told us that these costs would be earned back after graduation by students. And that was largely true until lately. And it still probably is true for students in STEM or medicine or business. At Chicago, an MBA costs a ridiculous $200,000 now. But if you're going to be working at a quant hedge fund or a futures trading firm, you will probably earn that back eventually. But if you're studying English literature and your plan is to teach at a public high school after graduation, then you're a lot better off going to the public university down the street and paying a fourth the price. That's just a fact of life for most majors now, and for all the pricey, really expensive universities that offer these majors. So we see a big problem here with the business models of these universities themselves. They're in a real jam. It would break their business model to charge a different price for students in quantitative finance, for example, at Chicago, compared to education or philosophy. Even though they're different schools selling different products. It would also break their business model to lower tuition, even though that's what many of these universities will need to do in order to survive. The tuition at University of Chicago's undergraduate schools is over $65,000. So students are paying $65,000 a year just in tuition, whether they're studying business or IT, where they might earn it back eventually, or something else where they probably won't. But even so, with all that said, at University of Chicago, they don't have problems attracting students. They don't have a problem getting them to overpay for the education they're getting. Their problem is on the expenses side and on liabilities. Their debts are too high, and those debts will soon need to be rolled over at much higher rates. Their expenses are way too high. They've hired new faculty and staff faster than the enrollment has grown, and their loans Many of these are floating rate debts. These doubled in just a couple of years, which means that their interest costs on these are going to be shooting up. So the University of Chicago now has a deficit of $239 million. That's the operating deficit. And they have a hiring freeze on that most people who are working there believe will turn into layoffs soon. But remember, Chicago is having these problems even though they're meeting their goals for recruitment. And they're charging some of the highest prices in the country. This is just fiscal mismanagement here. And it's happening at the best business school. It's happening at the best business school, maybe in the whole world. What do we learn at business school? Financial budgeting, demand forecasting, management of receivables and payables, the optimum capital structure. That is how you're going to finance your growth, whether through borrowing or through equity, things like that. These are things you're learning at the best business school in the world. They're just not doing it there. When businesses fail, it's usually because they didn't forecast demand properly. They thought they would have 100 customers per day. They rented a building, they hired people, but they only got 50 customers a day. If businesses do make a mistake on the expenses projection side, it's usually a good problem to have. You rented a building and hired people to serve 100 customers a day, but now you've got 200 customers a day. So you have to spend more. You need a bigger building. You have to hire more people. At Chicago, they got all the customers, all the students they expected. They were able to charge the price they wanted, but they just can't manage the money. And this is the spot they're in now. Chicago has over 7,000 undergraduate students, and they need the tuition from nearly half of those students just to cover the interest payments on their debt. And those payments are about to be going up as they're rolled over. There are problems everywhere, all across American higher education, well, all across education. As an American institution, higher ed has lost the respect and the admiration of most Americans who now have a very negative view. As an industry, it was always too dependent on beating the inflation rate by a factor of 2 or 3. They were always too dependent on foreign students, wealthy foreign students coming in. But even for the ones who meet all those targets, even for the ones who can manage to charge the prices they want, they've done a lousy job of managing the money. Now, for the entire industry, the day of reckoning is here, and even the best business school on the planet can't pay its bills. Thank you. Be good.